One of the stars of the new Australian film The Dressmaker is Hugo Weaving. He plays a country cop with a taste for wearing frocks. Not that Hugo's unfamiliar with roles that require him to do that. Jason Di Rosso caught up for a chat with him last week, and Hugo turned out to be surprisingly frank.
Well, Hugo Weaving, welcome to The Mix.
Thank you.
This is the first time you've reunited with Jocelyn Moorhouse since Proof, which was a real breakout film for you back in the early 90s.
You've been blind all your life.
I know.
What were you doing driving a car?
I forgot. Proof was her first film. It was the first film that I'd read that I really desperately wanted to do. It was the sort of film that I wanted to see. I wasn't just, you know, I thought it was a bit of a watershed actually in Australian writing. It felt like it was a contemporary urban psychological drama which was quite dark. And I loved working with Joss. I desperately wanted to do it. I'm so glad and ever grateful that she cast me in that. So it was really nice to come back and be on the set with her in Dressmaker.
Is that Dior?
Very good, Sergeant Farrett. My design, but Dior inspired.
Myrtle Dunnage.
Tilly.
You grew up.
You got old.
Of course, it's not the first time you've worn a frock on screen, and not the first time an Australian man has worn a frock on screen. There's something about Australian masculinity, I think, that seems to sort of conjure up these figures.
I think the classic male archetype here is so ridiculously blokey and masculine that it has to be popped. So you've got to put a frock on from time to time. One of the great things about setting this in this particular time is that it's during an era of classic haute couture. So it's celebrating a sense of style.
And style is fantasy
the
too.
beauty of the landscape,
yes,
which I think our films have always celebrated. In this one, you've got a sense of theatricality in the landscape, and then this western one-horse town sitting in amongst this fantastic backdrop.
She's back! The murderess is back!
Are there any things in your job as an actor that still make you nervous?
Oh yeah, I'm much more fearful now than I used to be. Much more fearful. And much more anxious. I would never have described myself as an anxious person even 10 years ago, but I would now. And the reason for that, don't know, not sure. But I don't necessarily think for an actor it's a bad thing, because if you're insecure in some way, if you're unsure in some way, if you're questioning yourself, and then you're a human being, and it also means you understand that all human beings have those feelings. And so I don't necessarily think fear is an enemy unless it's crippling you.
Why, Mr. Anderson? Why? Why? Why, Mr. Anderson? Why? Why do you persist?
I think all performers go through certain anxieties and excitements. There are pressures you put on yourself to do a good job. There are time pressures. There are all sorts of pressures to do this really difficult scene in the next 2 hours because we've got to move on to do something else in the day, which is even more difficult. You know, so they're quite big pressures. But that's always been a part of acting for me.
How do you cope? I mean, do you find a sort of solace in art?
Yeah, definitely reading, definitely going to the theatre, going to see great concerts. I'm a film buff. I love great filmmakers. I love great films. My family, friends, great food, travel, nature. So, and a bit of meditation.
Hugo Weaving, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
The Dressmaker is in cinemas nationally.